So welcome guys, this is the second session of the safety track of the Freelance Journalist Assembly. Thank you for being here. And as we know, journalists in general, we face increasing digital risks. We know that. And the reality is that if we don't protect ourselves and we don't protect our information, we can put at risk not only our safety, but the safety of our families, our colleagues, and our sources. So that's why we are here. And that's why, together with ACOS Alliance, the Rory Petros, and the Frontline Freelance Register, we created this space where you can learn how to identify these risks and how to address them. So thank you for being here. It's going to be a nice session. But before we start, I would like to tell you more about these three organizations that are joining us today, because they are leading this movement around safety around the world. It's not just in Europe, but across the world. So I'm going to share the screen with you to tell you more about these organizations. Just give me a second to be sure that you are seeing what I want to share with you. So it is important for you to know that the Rory Petros has been providing direct financial assistance to freelance journalists in crisis for the last 25 years. It offers a hardship fund, a training fund, and soon they will launch a legal aid fund, so stay tuned, guys. The Trust also delivers training focused on physical safety, digital security, and trauma management, which is a very important topic for the community. And basically what the Rory Petros wants is to build a professional resilience within the community. Estela, can you tell us more about the Frontline Freelance Register?
Yeah, the Frontline Freelance Register is the only representative body dedicated to freelance journalists worldwide. And their objective is to support the physical and the mental well-being of freelance journalists. They have just launched local chapters in Mexico and in the Ukraine, and they administer international press cards to freelance journalists around the world.
Thank you, Stella. And also, it's interesting for you to know that the Rory Petros and the Frontline Freelance Register are founding members of ACOS Alliance. ACOS is a coalition of news organizations, freelance journalist associations, and NGOs that work together to build a culture of safety in newsrooms for freelance journalists. They basically organize and collaborate in initiatives like this one, because it is important that we join forces to ensure and to guarantee the safety of freelance journalists around the world.
Great, thank you, Ana Maria. Hi everyone, it's really nice to be here today with you. As Ana Maria said, I'm Ella, I'm going to be your trainer today, and we're going to cover basically the kind of basics of digital safety and security. Unfortunately, I won't be able to get through everything because I think we have about 50 minutes. So you will probably have further questions. So you can feel free to follow up with me afterwards. I will put my email in the chat box at the end of the session, and I can do one-to-one consultation work with you as part of my work at the Committee to Protect Journalists, or at the International Women's Media Foundation as well. Session will be looking at risk assessments. I'm going to talk to you about digital security risk assessments in a minute. We're going to talk about account security, and we're also going to look at online harassment. You will have questions that may not fit into these particular sections. That's okay, just please drop them in the chat and I will also answer them as we go along, because a lot of digital security issues are related to each other. So, you know, if we're talking about account security, that can also link to VPN use, for example. So maybe you have questions about VPNs. I'm not covering them today extensively, but I can just talk about them. Okay, so feel free to drop any questions in the chat. I do like it when people are very communicative in the chat box. So put those questions in there and I will answer them. Okay, so to get started, risk assessments. I know that you did a session with my colleague Colin Pereira on risk assessments, physical risk assessments. So I imagine that a number of you, please raise your hand if you have done a physical risk assessment at some time for a media outlet. How are we looking here? I'm seeing no hands there. No hands, nobody's done a physical risk assessment. Well, this is not great news. Has anyone done a digital security risk assessment for a media outlet? No. Holly's shaking her head. That is not surprising. We have found that media outlets quite often are unaware of digital risk assessments, or they have not really kind of, yes, they haven't considered it as an issue in terms of security, okay? So today I'm going to be talking to you about something that's particularly important, and that is risk and how you understand risk in terms of your digital safety, okay? So my argument is always, and this is especially true for freelancers because I used to be a freelance journalist and I know how freelance journalists operate, you need to do 2 digital risk assessments, okay? One for your life as a general whole and one per story. And the reason for this is if people are interested in finding out information about you online, and they have a kind of a bad interest in you, okay? So an adversary or somebody you've annoyed because you published a certain story, they are not just going to look at your work element. They are going to come for everything, okay? So on the internet, your digital risk is wide open there for people to kind of look at and take advantage of. So I'm going to walk you through some steps and questions that you should really be asking yourself when it comes to your own personal risk. And then we'll focus on what is risk for particular stories, okay? I'm just gonna share my screen. I will no longer be able to see you when I share my screen. I'm not sure if you will be able to see me. So maybe Anna Maria will let me know. There we go. Can you see that?
Yeah, we can see the presentation, and wonderful. I think the guys can see you.
Can you see me still? Or am I just my name?
Just your name.
Yeah, for some reason it does that. Okay, so I'll probably be toggling back and forth through the presentation so I can see your faces, which makes it a lot more enjoyable for me, so I can see if you're looking confused or engaged. Here we go, that's me. That's what we covered, digital risk. Okay, so in terms of your own digital risk, you have to think about your online profile. And what does this mean? This means how you are presented to the world via the internet. So when you are crossing a border, when you're applying for a visa, when you are stopped by law enforcement and being questioned, when you reach out to sources and you want to interview them, probably the thing they're going to do is they're going to look you up online to see who you are. So when people look you up online to see who you are, the information that they find on the internet is how you are presented to the world. So what you really want to be doing is kind of crafting your online profile so that you are happy with the information that people find online about you, and that information does not put you, your sources or your family and friends and colleagues at risk. And I'll be talking more about that when we come to the last section of this session. We're also talking about your digital habits. So when you're thinking about your own risk assessment, you need to be thinking, what kind of person are you when it comes to technology? Are you the kind of person who can, set up technology pretty easily? Do you know how to encrypt a hard drive? Are you the kind of person who always has the latest phone? Are you the kind of person who puts a lot of information on social media? Or are you the kind of person who has an iPhone 6 from X amount of years ago and you don't know whether it's been updated or not? Everybody has different digital habits and different interests in technology. And this really does shape your digital risk, okay? And it's not necessarily the case that someone who is more interested in technology is safer, but it is the case that if you're more informed about digital risk, then you can make choices to reduce your own risk. Your location is really important. Where do you live? And what are the rules and legislation and laws in that country regarding digital security issues? So I know that there are some people here who have called in from countries where their governments are particularly more sophisticated in terms of their digital security capacity. So you really need to be aware of that as freelance journalists because you could be breaking the law and not realize it. It could be that your behavior online is putting you at risk, and you didn't realize that that was also something that was happening, or maybe you are aware of it, and you know, you need to take some steps to secure that activity online. So that's why your location is really important. It's also really important kind of, you know, the passport that you hold. Do you hold 2 passports? Are you the kind of person that travels a lot? All of this feeds into your digital risk. Why? Because different countries have different laws and different legislation and act in different ways, governments do, when it comes to digital security. Finally, you need to be thinking about adversaries, and this is basically the bad guys. Who is interested in you online and, you know, physically, in terms of, you know, is it a government? Is it a criminal body? Is it a very organized group online? Are you covering kind of the rise of white supremacist groups? Are you covering, you know, kind of groups who are very passionate about their topic, animal rights people, for example. These people are really active online, and I'll talk later about that when we come to talking about online abuse and harassment, which journalists are seeing a massive uptick in over the past few years. So that's a little bit about kind of you and your digital risk. So you really need to kind of sit down and have a think about that, and it does help to kind of map it out with a pen and paper. Just kind of be thinking about, you know, how many accounts do you have? Do you know how many services you've signed up for? Do you need all these services? Are there accounts that you can actually go in, delete your data, and now delete the account? These are issues that can really help you be safer. So once you've mapped your own digital risk, then you need to be thinking about the stories that you work on. And the first thing, you have a topic for that story. Even before you put a finger on a keyboard, you need to be thinking about how you can do this research in the most secure way possible. Why? Because as soon as your finger touches a keyboard and you type something onto the internet, there is a trace. And quite often I have casework with journalists where they were working on a story and the story seemed pretty, you know, fine, and then they, you know, 2 months down the line, they realize that they have stumbled across something which, you know, is particularly sensitive, and they have annoyed, you know, some kind of, they've annoyed an adversary that has high, you know, a sophisticated tech capacity. Sometimes it's impossible to know, but it is always possible to take steps to reduce the risk when it comes to secure research. And that includes kind of, you know, are you going to be using a VPN? It includes researching, you know, who you are going to be reaching out to, and how that puts you and them at risk, which is the next point, which is your sources. How are you going to communicate with them? What tools, and by tools I mean the way in which, so it could be, is it email, is it a telephone, is it WhatsApp, is it Signal? The different tools that you use relate to different risks, and these risks really depend on your own personal profile. So, you know, are you a journalist who has attacks previously, has been attacked previously online? If so, highly likely you'll be attacked again. Have you annoyed, you know, or been a target of a particular government, and as a result of that, you know, maybe you're kind of being watched by them. All of this feeds into your risk profile, and that, in terms of digital risk, it doesn't really go away even if you change the story, because they're still thinking about, you know, the story that you did previously, and that will, you know, feed into how they react to you online in the future. Think about data storage. Where are you keeping the information that you are handling? Okay, so documents, photos, film footage, conversations that you're having with people, both digitally and in person. Where is this information being stored? This is especially important for freelance journalists because you generally don't have the backup of a media outlet where you can be using their cloud service, for example, or their servers. Do you know how safe your information is in the cloud? Not very safe, to be honest with you, because anything that is connected to the internet is insecure. I'll talk about that next when we come to account security. So these things need to be thought about in advance, basically beforehand. And finally, you need to think about your adversaries. You know, who is interested in the story? How annoyed are they going to be? What is their tech capacity? You know, how advanced are they in their sophistication of tech? And, you know, what are the steps that they have previously taken against journalists or human rights defenders? Normally they attack human rights defenders first and then come for journalists. So it is a good idea to do a bit of research on that before you start working on your story. I've left off here actually location, which is an error on my part. Location is really important for the story. Are you traveling for the story? Are you crossing borders? Obviously not at the moment so much with COVID. But all of that feeds into your risk profile. If you're moving from one country to another country, different countries have different laws and legislations around digital safety and security. You know, maybe in one country encryption is illegal. Maybe in one country crossing the border with pirated software, in some cases it is illegal to do that. And that can land you in a lot of trouble if they decide to use it against you. So thinking about all of these things is a really important part of your risk assessment process. There are a number of guides and resources that you can find online. The Roy Pett Trust has a digital security risk assessment document which is on their website. I recommend that you have a look at that. That is, and if you have any questions about it, you can drop me a line. It is fairly extensive, so maybe you won't need all of it, but you can kind of cut it and tailor it to your own needs. Stella, are there any questions about risk assessment? Not anyone?
Sorry, I had to unmute myself.
Hi.
So far, there's one question, which is mine, which is, I was wondering, is there like one common, more like day-to-day thing that most people do and don't even realize that it's actually pretty bad in terms of safety?
Just one thing. Passwords is probably, yeah, having very poor passwords is probably the thing that most people have, including probably digital security trainers, and that is because we are human, and you know, we don't have time or we make mistakes. That is, you know, password misuse is a common issue when it comes to digital safety. And really, passwords are basically the essential part of digital safety. It's a bit like driving a car and not wearing a seatbelt. So the password is basically like a seatbelt in terms of, you know, the basics of digital safety. There are other things that journalists do without realizing it. So one of them is kind of reaching out to people through insecure communications methods, you know, such as email, for example, which is very insecure. And also, you know, they're crossing borders, or before COVID, with a lot of information on their devices. You know, think about how much information is on your mobile phone, on your cell phone. Your whole life is on that cell phone. And if you're a freelance journalist, and I know because I used to be one, you probably do not separate out your work life from your personal life, which means you have one email account, which you probably use for everything, including, you know, writing to editors, writing to sources, and, you know, writing to your mother or your doctor. And, you know, this means that if your account is breached, then that means that people gain access to your account and the information in it. They have access to all areas of your life. So if there's one tip that I can give you, it is please separate out your work life from your personal life. If you have an email which you use for everything, probably you primarily use it mostly for work. I would be going into that email, I would be deleting, you know, personal email contacts from it. I would be setting up an email just to be in contact with kind of family and friends, and just try to separate that out. And that goes in the same for Facebook and Instagram and other social media sites. A lot of freelancers mix Facebook, especially, they have family on there, they have kind of work colleagues on there, and they have sources on there, and they all tend to be kind of mixed together, and it is a good idea to try to separate that out as much as possible. One way to do that is to try and get your Facebook page verified as an official journalist Facebook page, which can be difficult for freelancers unless you have a media outlet email, which is a big problem for freelance journalists. The other thing that you can do is to create lists, which is where you separate out, you make a list for friends, a list for colleagues, and a list for kind of sources. And then when you publish information, you can control who can see that information on there. And I would really just be reviewing, who is in your friends list. Do you know these people? Do you want them seeing kind of your most, family photos or kind of on a Sunday afternoon? So it really is about kind of separation, is really the best thing that you can do to try to secure your information online.
Great. We have another question. I will just shoot it right after. It's from Nicole, and she's asking, what do you think about boxcryptor.com to encrypt your data that goes into the cloud? And maybe that could be a good springboard, because I heard about Telegram that it's good for messaging. Do you have any, in general, any recommendations for good and safe tools, or do you know like a list or a place where people could find them?
Yeah, I mean, the issue with digital security tools is that because of the very nature of digital security, so digital safety is constantly changing, and the reason for this is technology is constantly evolving. We are always in this kind of cat and mouse game with governments and, kind of organized groups online, hacking groups or organized criminals, for example, to kind of secure tools for people to use, and people are always looking for ways to hack them, right? So we are constantly in this back and forth. So it's really difficult for us to kind of say, hey, you should use this tool. And the reason for this is that this tool might be secure now, but 2 months down the line, it might be hacked. So your job, and this is a really, I cannot stress this enough, is to stay kind of on top of digital safety and security news. So you are journalists, you follow the news, just sign up for, newsletters to get information from the technology section of, news outlets. Keep an eye on whether companies have been hacked and has data been leaked, because what often happens is that data is bought and sold on the internet, in the dark web. And that information then can be used to target people, including journalists and human rights defenders. And keep up to date with kind of digital safety news. There are, in terms of digital security, there are lots of different types of digital security people, just like there's lots of different types of journalists. It's a really important that, you kind of stay up to date on that. And I can make some recommendations for that at the end. So if there's no more questions, I will move on to account security.
Oh, there's one quick one.
Yeah, okay, go.
Before I think, yeah, you should move on. But Preeti was asking if journalists should be using Wi-Fi in public settings.
Yes, like I said, this also really depends on your risk. Okay, so what are you doing on that Wi-Fi? Are you kind of just, looking at the news? Then fine. Are you trying to contact a sensitive source? Probably not so fine. So it just really depends on where you're located, okay, and your own personal risk related to your threat, basically. So when you are connected to public Wi-Fi, it's a bit like being in a swimming pool. Everybody's on the net and everybody's kind of swimming around on it. When you're on your own personal internet, it's basically just you using it. So the risk is there's a lot of people on the internet, and it is possible to see what people are looking at on the internet. So there are special tools that hackers can buy, and they can just kind of see, oh, you're connected to Gmail or you're connected to Facebook. Now, websites are, if you look in the browser, you'll probably have seen a little padlock to the left-hand side. That means that website is encrypted. So they can see that you're looking at Facebook, but they can't see your content of your Facebook page because that information should be encrypted. So all you've got to do if you're on public Wi-Fi is just look to make sure that the websites you are on have that little padlock. And the worst thing is that people will be able to see that you are connected to it, but they won't be able to see what you're doing. Okay. I wouldn't be checking my bank details on public Wi-Fi, to be honest with you, or doing any kind of transaction. And that goes for airport Wi-Fi. Just think of all the people who are going through an airport. It's a lot of people. So not all those people will be, nice people. They may be well looking at the internet to try and see if they can, steal some money off you. Okay, I'm going to move on. Are we ready? So basically, you need to ask yourself, what do you want to protect? Who do you want to protect it from in terms of your digital safety? How will you protect it? The steps that you need to take, and what are the consequences if you fail? Okay, so these are kind of the 4 questions you really need to be looking at here in order to secure yourself online and your sources. Okay. I'm going to move on to account security, and account security is basically passwords. People have a lot of problems with passwords. The reason for this is that we have a lot of accounts. We don't always remember our passwords. They're very inconvenient, and they're quite easy to hack. So this is especially true if you don't have good practice around passwords. So what makes a good password? So I'm interested to know how people's passwords are going. Please don't put your passwords in the chat. That is not a security measure that we want to be taking. But if you are thinking about passwords, and you should be, I really recommend, if you take something away from today's training, is that you think about your passwords and take some steps to secure them. Your password should be long, more than 14 characters and upwards. The longer it is, the more secure it is. And this is because mathematically, the longer it is, the more difficult it is to crack. It's not a guy in a hoodie trying to type into a keyboard, trying to get access to your account. What it is, they're sophisticated algorithms, okay? So the longer your password is, it just takes longer to find, the password. So please make your password long. They should be unique. That means you should not be using them on any other site. So each site you sign up for should have a unique password. And the reason for this is that passwords are often breached. So that means that, passwords are stolen from companies. When you sign up for an account with, I don't know, EasyJet or, an airline company, you sign up with your email. And if you use the same password for your airline account as you do for your email account, and the airline gets hacked and they have not kept your data in a secure form, your password is now out there on the internet, and it is being probably bought and sold. Okay, so this is why it's really important not to reuse passwords. I cannot stress this enough. They should be unique. Please don't put any personal information in your passwords. No date of birth, no first line of your address, no name of your pet. And the reason for it is this information is really easy to find online. So you're looking for a mixture of numbers, letters, and characters. Now, people say to me, Ella, how can I remember all these passwords? This is a nightmare. And I say, yes, this is true. So there are 2 options here. You can either just write your passwords down and keep them on a piece of paper in your home. And this really depends on your risk. If you are living in a country where you feel that you may be detained, okay, or if you're also traveling a lot, you don't want to be carrying, a piece of paper with all your passwords around or crossing the border with that, or you are in a home situation that you are, concerned that people may gain access to this, then obviously it's not the correct digital security method for you. Okay, so it really just depends on your risk, and that's why it's really important to do a risk assessment for yourself. How secure is your home? Okay, if it is secure and you're not traveling, writing down your passwords is a lot more secure than reusing passwords. Okay, and that is currently some best practice advice there. Okay, from the digital security community. The other thing you can do is use a password manager. Has anyone used a password manager before? Stella, can you see if anyone's nodding and shaking their head?
I think I see nods, but I also see head shaking, but one password was mentioned in the chat.
Great. Yes. So a password manager is a service. So it's an app. You can download it to your phone and for your computer. And what it does is that it will create and store passwords for you. And this is great. So if there is one thing I recommend that you get, apart from separating out your work and your personal, please get a password manager. they are, there is one called 1Password that does a special rate for journalists, I think, so you might want to look into that. When you get your password manager, you download it, you need to create a long, unique password for that password manager. So I recommend that you spend some time, you think of that password beforehand, you write it down and you store it somewhere safe, or you try to memorize it if you need to, okay? The app will be on your phone. On your computer, it's a plugin in the browser, okay? And you can kind of just log in and out of it as you would with your email. So you log into it and you add an account and you generate a new password. Please don't just use the old password that you were using before. You need to create a new one. Sometimes you can decide how long you want that password to be, so just make it really long, okay? I recommend just starting with accounts that you are, you know, not so concerned about at the beginning, maybe your Netflix account or any kind of PayPal account or something like that, before adding accounts that you are, like your social media or your email. The reason for that is it can take a little bit of getting used to, so just kind of test it out first and see how it works for you, okay? Password managers, this is what they do. It's a service that stores and creates passwords. It is currently the most secure, okay? It's the most secure way of creating a password, and it does sync between your device. Please, a password manager is not the option to save the password in the browser. You know, Google Chrome says, would you like Google Chrome to save your password? Please click here, no. And the reason for this, is really easy to hack a browser. And if you don't keep your browser up to date, it becomes vulnerable to attack, okay? It's really important to update your software, your phone, your computer, update the software on it, update your apps and update your browsers. Why? Because hackers look for vulnerabilities in the code. And if the code is old, you know, it's easier to find these vulnerabilities. When you get an update, what they're doing is basically revising the code and making it more secure, okay? So if you have stored your passwords in the browser, please, for those accounts, just go in now and change and make a new password for them, okay? So if you are using a password manager and you have long passwords, then you're halfway to making your accounts as secure as they can be. The next thing you need to do is turn on what we call two-factor authentication. Do people know what this is? Stella, can you see any nodding? Is anyone using two-factor, sometimes known as two-step?
John nodding, otherwise,
Right.
Yeah, yes, says the chat.
Great. So this is, a lot of people are familiar with this with their banking. So they log on to online banking and they get sent a code to their phone, okay? So this is an extra layer of security. It basically means if someone has your email address and your password, they also need access to your phone in order to get this code, in order to enter your email address, for example. So it does make it really hard to, it makes it more difficult to hack your account. Please just turn it on wherever you can, okay? It's a really important step to securing your accounts. And think about all the information that is in your account. So if you have a Gmail account, it's not just your email account, it's all the services related to it. So it's the cloud account, your photos, your contact list. So everything within that service is secured by your password. So if you have a really short password, or your passwords, you know, your name 1234, you know, this makes it a lot easier to hack your account. So please turn on two-step verification where you can. So here there are 3 types of two-factor authentication. Any form is better than none, okay? So the first form is SMS, so this is text message. This is the one that most people are probably using. So you go into your privacy settings, you link your telephone as a form of two-step verification, and it sends through the code to your phone. Now this is the least secure form of two-step verification, okay? So it's better than nothing, but I really recommend that people move over to the apps. So there are a range of apps that you can use to secure, and they work exactly the same as the SMS. So the code is sent to the app on your phone. These are free. You can download them onto your phone. And what this basically makes it more secure is that your information is not passing through your cell phone provider, as in the case of the text message, okay? So it's not going through a cell phone provider. This can be complicated for people who live in countries where governments have access to cell phone provider information. In fact, everyone now, everyone's governments have access to cell phone provider companies, the information that they store, but some countries are more blasé about it than others, shall we say, so that, you know, the access is easier, or, you know, the company is owned by the brother-in-law of the president. Okay, so it is much better to kind of move off the SMS and onto this app. I really recommend that you download those. If your threat model, so if your threat is particularly high, so if you think you are targeted by a government or, you know, a white supremacist group, and you have noticed that people are trying to access your account, you might want to get what we call a hardware key. This is a little key that you insert into your computer and you link it to your account. Okay, they cost about $50, so they're not cheap, and you will need to buy two, one as a backup, and you will link this key to your account, and then have it as a backup as well. Are there any questions about that? Are there any questions?
I think not about the two-factor authentication, but about the password. There are quite some.
Okay, off you go.
I think I think Natalie's question you already answered about how safe is a browser extension for a password manager. Not so much as I understood.
No, not so much. No, not secure at all.
Virginia Kilst has asked, is it safe to have a combination of letters and numbers, and then I add the name of the service that I use the password for? For example, a random combination like 123 ABC Gmail.
Not particularly, no. You are looking for a random selection of numbers and letters. Why? Because if they know that this is a common tactic that people do, so if they're trying to target your Gmail account, they will just use that as a combination. Yeah.
And then Preeti is asking again, how does the hardware key work?
Yes, so this hardware key, it's a little bit like a USB. You kind of plug it into your computer, or you rub it actually on the back of your phone for some models. Please check that it's compatible with the phone that you are using. Okay, so there's lots of different types. Google does one. It's called the Google Authenticator Key, and that is part of their Google Advanced Protection program. I don't know if anyone's heard of that. You may well be interested in signing up for that. That's a free service. So if you're using Gmail, it's a free service that they offer where they monitor your account for kind of government hacking, etc. And all you have to do is kind of write to them and tell them, hey, I'm a journalist and I need this service. In order to use it, you will need two of these hardware keys in order to join. This image here is what we call a YubiKey. It's a company, I forget which country it is, Sweden, Norway, maybe. They create these YubiKeys, and you just go into the security settings of your accounts, and it will give you the option to turn on two-step verification, and it will say SMS, app, or hardware key or token. You will click it and they will walk you through the steps to secure your account using the key. Not all services support this key, so just be aware of that. Most of the main ones, kind of like Facebook, Gmail, etc., do, but not all services are able to support it as yet.
Right. One participant, Saul, has just shared the link to the YubiKey.
Great,
in the chat as well.
Yeah.
I think we have one last, or like time for one last question regarding passwords, which is, do you have to then change the password for the password manager frequently?
Oh, good question. Yes, I forgot to mention that. Yeah, so if you have a really long secure password, so really long and unique, and you do not feel that it has been compromised in any way, you do not have to change it. And this is the good thing about making a long, unique password. So unless you think someone's seen your password, or you think maybe your computer's been infected by spyware, or you wrote it down somewhere and you've lost a piece of paper, you don't need to change that password unless you feel that you are particularly vulnerable, and if that is the case, then maybe you want to change it depending on your risk profile. So you could decide, how often that would be, but generally the best practice now is it's long, and if they're long and unique, you don't need to change them.
Great.
So basically, Password Manager will resolve that for you as a step towards greater security. Great, thank you very much. I'm going to move on to your online profile. I talked about this when I talked about risk assessments, earlier. Your online profile is how you are seen by the world, okay? So task time. Can you please now put your name into Google and let us see what information comes up about you? So just put your name into Google and just press, enter. And then can you put in the chat box what type of kind of information you are finding about yourself? Okay, so if there's any surprising information there, or any information that you did not know, then just drop that in there. And let's have a look and see what people are finding. I'm just going to come out so I can see people. Hey, everyone. You've got about 30 seconds to do that, so not a great deal of time. Okay, Adam is a photographer, but apparently he did all the music for South Park, so he obviously has someone with the same name as him, so that was news to him. Great. Natalie, photos of me. Okay, somebody's got their Linda's master's thesis. Great. Someone's got their website, Virginia, my Twitter, my profile on the Freelance Journalist Organization. Great. John's got his LinkedIn, Facebook. Oh, Adam is really busy online. Ghost hunters. Yeah, you obviously have a very common name. Holly's got profiles from old previous jobs, interviews and podcasts. Great. Okay. Caroline did this with Colin last week, and it's, oh, damn Colin, he beat me to it. Yes, her home address was there. Great. Yeah, not so great. Okay, so ideally, when I'm searching for you online, what I would like to find is just information about your job. Okay, so I should be finding all your work. I should be finding professional headshots of you or you on work locations, and maybe a little bit of personal information as long as you have controlled that information. What ideally I wouldn't want to be finding is your address, photos of your family, you on holiday. I wouldn't want to be finding, Instagram pictures of you celebrating your birthday. Why? Because all of this information can be used against you, and it can be used to target and harass you. Okay, so the issue for journalists is, and I feel very, it's not a great position to be in. Okay, so for the past 10 years, especially if you were a freelance journalist, you have been encouraged to put your life online. Okay, so you have been encouraged to build your brand, publish your information, connect with your audience, and kind of open yourself up to the world, and put all this data out there. And now what we are seeing is that data is now being weaponized and used against you. Especially if you're a woman, especially if you are covering, anything to do with gender, race, anything political, if you've been covering any kind of the extreme branches of politics, you will be getting a backlash online probably because of this. I see a lot of people are nodding their heads and agreeing with me on this. Okay, so you probably feel that you have information out on the internet that you really don't have control over, and it's just kind of out there, and in some cases you don't even know how it got there. Okay, part of my role that I have is that sometimes media outlets contract me to research journalists for their media outlet to see how vulnerable they are. I can put together easily a 20-30 page report on a journalist just from social media accounts and public databases. So I'm not even paying to access information. There is an awful lot of information out there probably about you on the internet. If you have an unusual name, this is great for building your brand as a journalist, but it also makes you really easy to find online. Okay, so I'm going to walk you now through some tips for helping you be more secure online. Okay, so I'm just going to toggle back out to, I am conscious of the time. We have about, do we have much, 10 minutes? How long do I have?
Yeah, let's say 15 more or less to have a last round of questions.
Excellent. Yeah. Great. That is good. Okay. So what you need to be thinking about is private versus public information. Okay, so what information is out there, what information should be private, and what should be, you are happy to be public. So keep it private. Okay, so your date of birth, any ID numbers, so that's your identity card, your health card number, your passport number. Okay, once I had a journalist, and this is a true story, publish a picture on his Facebook. He's a freelance journalist, of his plane ticket and his passport, including like his passport cover, and the inside details of all his passport and his plane ticket to a country that was not known to be particularly friendly to journalists. Please don't do that. These are quite very insecure steps in terms of your digital safety. Okay, so sometimes we're doing things we don't even realize we're doing it because we've been encouraged to build a brand. Hey, I'm going off to this country tomorrow, I'm covering this. Your people following your work are looking at that, but also governments and authorities who may detain you at the border. Okay, your home address. Luckily, being based in Europe, we have better data security rules than people based in the US. People in the US, their address is all over the internet always. Personal phone number. If you're a freelancer, that will also be your work number. Your personal email is probably also your work email. That's why it's really important to try and separate those out. Do you want people knowing about your family? I often see kind of Twitter bios, like politics reporter, father of two, married to Joan. Yeah. So do you need people to know that information? Really consider your risk with that. And think about, location. Do you want people to know where you're living? Do you need people to know, that you go to this particular coffee shop every day? Really think about it, because when someone targets you online, what they're going to do is they're going to go straight to your social media and they're just going to dig through it until they find something. And if they have money and time and tech tools, it can they can turn up a lot of information. Okay, so the information that so I'm not saying don't put this information on the internet. I'm just saying, be aware of how it puts you at risk if it is on the internet. Okay, and the bad news is, if that information is already on the internet, even if you delete it now, it will probably exist in some form on the internet. And this is because maybe someone took a screenshot of it. Maybe it has been archived in the Internet Archive services like the Wayback Machine, which some of you may be familiar with for searching for information on the internet. It's very hard. Information is like water. Once it's on the internet, it's really hard to kind of rein it back in. So that's the private information that you want public. Is it a work-based website with your work-related content on there, with work email and a work phone and work location? Maybe even then that could also put you at risk, but at least you are in control of it. It's not kind of spreading around there, published by people that you don't know who they are. Okay, so freelancers need to get work, they need to be employed, so they need to have a work email, but probably please don't make that the same as your personal email. Why? Because if you're signing up for kind of banking stuff with your personal email, it's also your work email, then people have access to the email that could be used to access your banking information, for example. Okay, segregate out your information. It's really important. Okay. So what happens during an attack? So as I mentioned before, they're going to go to your social media. They're just going to go looking through it all. They're going to look for information to do the following. Okay, so either you'll get public facing attacks. They start to harass you on Twitter, on Facebook, leaving public messages. They're probably then going to go into your direct messages and your emails and call up on your phone and leave voice messages and attack you that way. What they will do is they will look through images. Yeah, they're looking for images, photos, etc. of you. They will find those in your social media feeds. Please think carefully about images that are online about you. And the reason for this is, what they tend to do is they take an image, and it's just an image of you, at a formal event with a glass in your hand, having a drink, and all of a sudden, you're an alcoholic. How can we trust this journalist? Okay, and I've seen that happen quite often. If you're a woman, they will be looking for pictures of you on the beach, at the gym, in evening wear. And this is a really common tactic by online harassers. They really look to damage your image or try to embarrass you. It also depends on, you know, the country that you live in and the culture that you're living in. You know, they try to really kind of harm you in that way. Okay, I've seen this happen to male journalists as well as women as well. Just really be mindful about images that are online. Okay, they also will look through your social media posts and try and resurface posts that you did, you know, 5 years ago, and try and use that as a way to discredit you. So it may be that you want to delete tweets. There are services that you can use that will delete old tweets. So it just basically deletes information from your Twitter feed, and it will regularly do that for you. And you'll need to go through Facebook as well and think about whether you want to delete those messages as well. I'm not saying you have to. I'm just giving you, you know, kind of best practice here. The next thing that happens is quite often they put out a call to have you doxed, and that is the publishing of your personal information that can be used either to identify you, such as your date of birth, or your social security number, or your health card number, or locate you, such as your address, or communicate with you, such as your telephone number. And the call is put out with the aim of mass circulation of your data in order to cause you some kind of harm. We are seeing doxing as an increasing method of attack, and it used to be, you know, if you were covering politics, if you were covering, you know, kind of extreme group, far right, etc., the likelihood of you being doxed was quite high. But now we are seeing it happen just to journalists who previously, you know, journalists covering health, journalists covering music. The editor of Pitchfork magazine wrote a review of a Taylor Swift album, the new album, and she gave it like 3 out of 5 stars, and the Taylor Swift fans doxed her online. Okay, so doxing is becoming an increasing method of attack against journalists in order to harass and silence and threaten them. And obviously the worst case scenario is that this online attack becomes a physical attack afterwards, and people turn up either at your home or at your place of work. Okay, so it's just a little bit about kind of how it happens, and kind of this is why it's really important to know who your adversary is and how organized are they online. Okay, some groups are really organized online, and they will, you know, if you're covering animal rights, veganism, if you are writing anything to do with anti-vaxxers, the trans, there's a big debate in the trans community at the moment, and there's a lot of, quite angry messaging going back and forth between people who are pro and against. So really research the community before, and their digital security capacity before covering them, and take steps to prepare yourself. So this is how you're going to prepare yourself. Please Google yourself, and please do it on other search engines too. Okay, so when you're Googling yourself, Google is just throwing you up the most common searches. So if you always use Google, it's just going to throw you up the things that you always were looking for. So it's really important for you to search on other search engines too. Firefox, Internet Explorer, if anyone's still using that. Just look on all the search engines, check video and photo as well as news as well. Okay, if you're covering countries, you know, China, Russia, etc., they have very sophisticated tech capacity. These countries, Turkey as well, Egypt. If you've been covering any of these, please check the search engines in there, made in those countries. So Baidu in China, Yandex in Russia, for example, they will be throwing up research results on you as well, possibly too, which you don't know about. Please set calendar reminders to do this. So every 2 months, be like, oh, Friday afternoon, just going to Google myself and see what information is out there. Please set up a Google alert for your name. Some of you may already be doing this, including any common misspelling of your name, okay? Because not everybody will spell your name correctly. So they may be kind of harassing you online and you don't even know about it because they've spelled your name incorrectly. Once you've mapped what information is available about you online, you need to take steps to remove your data where possible, okay? If it is a site that you control, so your Facebook, your Twitter, then it's great. You can go in, you can delete it. Please be aware it takes a while for the internet algorithm to kind of crawl through and delete information. So it's not going to do it straight away. It appears that it's disappeared from your account, but it will still be visible in the search engine. Okay, so please, I recommend that you take steps to do this now. The more you can do beforehand, the more prepared you will be. Please speak to family and friends and let them know. I can see we have some questions. I'm just going to finish up here and we'll be done. So I'll come to those questions at the end, I think. Please speak to family and friends about your privacy and security and let them know, because if they cannot find information on you, they will go to your mother's Facebook page or your father-in-law's Facebook page and they will look for information there. I've seen it time and time again. This is a common attack method. And if I cannot find information on journalists, if I've been employed to research them and see how vulnerable they are, I will go to their family's Facebook pages and look them up there, and I will find information, because guaranteed their family will not, especially if they're older, they will not have secured their accounts. Okay, you will probably need to sit with them and go through this. If you just tell them to secure their Facebook, they won't know what that means. You're going to have to walk it through with them. Secure your accounts, we've covered that. Passwords, two-factor authentication. Hacking is a common part of online harassment. Look at your privacy settings on your social media. Please be aware of what information people can see. Social media companies often change these privacy settings on a regular basis. So something that you thought was private, last week may not be private in 2 months' time. So it's a really good idea to kind of build that into your regular check-in and check-up to see how secure they are. I've mentioned speaking with family and friends. You don't need to scare them, just kind of give them the general idea of, this is the world we're living in currently, and, these are the steps that we need to take to make us more secure. Please understand your attackers, who is attacking you, why are they doing it, what is their capacity, and then you need to know what to do if you are attacked. It's much better if you have a plan than if you are kind of caught unawares. Okay, maybe you need to speak to your editor about it if they're asking you to cover groups or organizations that are common doxing use common doxing tactics. Then you need to be quite upfront with your editors if you feel you have that relationship with them, and speak to them about that and what they will do to protect you. Okay, during an attack, I'm just going to talk through this and then I'm done. Please you might want to turn your accounts to private. I really recommend that you do that. Sometimes it can be helpful to just have one account open, so all the hatred goes to one account, and just make everything else private. Please make sure you've turned on two-factor and you have a good long password. Maybe you want to ask someone to monitor your account. That really just depends on you. That's a personal preference. They obviously have to be someone you trust. Let family, friends, and colleagues know. You may well want to ring up, your bank, your utilities company as well, and let them know that you are, at risk of identity theft if you feel that that is a possibility, and get them to put a note on your file, because sometimes online harassers, what they'll do is they'll try to access your accounts, and try and take out credit cards in your name. I've seen that happen quite a lot to people who have been attacked by online harassers. You may feel you need to document any attacks that are particularly aggressive or violent or threaten physical harm. I understand when you have a lot of attacks, it's quite difficult to kind of weigh out which ones are real and which ones aren't. I think, it can be useful to document, especially if you want to take that information to an editor to show them. If you want to go to a freedom of the press, like a free press organization, and ask them to support your cause, that can be helpful. It can also be helpful if you're going to contact law enforcement. Really just depends on your country and whether you think they will help you with that. Okay. Well-being. Please take care of your mental health. Being attacked online is a really stressful and isolating experience. Feel free to talk to people. There are a lot of resources online now to help with that. Step back from your computer and just try and spend some time doing something else that can really help. Okay. So that's about it in terms of kind of very brief and very quick run through of during an attack. If you do have more questions, you can feel free to drop them in the chat and I'll look at them now. But just as a wrap up, I'm just going to go through the 5 steps that you should take after during this week in order to be more secure. Okay, so number one, do your risk assessment. Number two, separate out your work and your personal. Please use a password manager, turn on two-factor, Google yourself regularly, and speak to family, friends, and colleagues. So I think that is that. We have a very long list of resources here that you can get. The Roy Peck Trust has some really great resources. They've got the risk assessment template. They've also got the digital security guide. ACOS Alliance has some great resources for freelancers. So that includes physical and digital. The Committee Protect Journalists, we've got a risk assessment template as well, and a digital safety kit, including a lot of information for how to protect your data online. I will drop those in the chat in a minute. IWF, that's the International Women's Media Foundation, has a course which is about knowing your trolls. And the Electronic Frontier Foundation has a surveillance self-defense toolkit, which can be useful too. Maybe I can send these over to Anna and she can email them over or something. Or maybe I'll drop them in the chat now.